Hi everyone, it's Nick, and I'm here to tackle another one of my favorite game series, if not my number one. This time, we're going to tackle Fire Emblem. I've loved every game I've played, but the community is very divisive, especially on some of the more recent additions to the series. I had a couple of times where fellow gamers have actually asked me which Fire Emblem game to start with, and that was mainly because I was streaming Radiant Dawn, but this is what this video is here to tackle. It's called Which Fire Emblem Game You Should Play First, but it's going to give you a route into the addictive tactical RPG genre, which includes games like Final Fantasy Tactics, XCOM, and Advance Wars. I'll be focusing on two main routes, which is whether you're more story or gameplay focused. The short answer, in my opinion, is Fire Emblem Sacred Stones, and it is for a couple of reasons. The Fire Emblem series as a whole is pretty difficult for newcomers, and I think this is due to the fact that there aren't many people who've played a game similar to it. Sacred Stones, though, has one of the ways of removing all difficulty in the game with a little place on the map called the Tower of Valmy. This is an optional part of the game, but it is an easy way to level grind, which not all Fire Emblem games have due to it being more common in the later installments of the series. Most people get into this series with gameplay, and many people don't understand all of the options you have for battling, because there is a lot. If you start with Sacred Stones and get stuck, you can go level up, class up your units, to experiment in the battles and see which strategies work out for you. This game is also on Virtual Console for the Wii U for cheap, which makes it easier to obtain legally. If you don't want to start with Sacred Stones, I would either start with Fire Emblem 7 The Blazing Blade or Fire Emblem Awakening. Fire Emblem 7 is great because it has a tutorial with Lyn to give you an optional introduction to the game before throwing you into the harder maps. Other Fire Emblem games also don't quote-unquote throw you into the fire either, but the pacing is done well, if not slower than other Fire Emblem games, so it gives a good gradual difficulty increase. Some people might actually get mad at me for recommending Awakening, but this is where a huge part of the community became divisive, but I think it's a good starting point, honestly. Fire Emblem is, as a game franchise as a whole, was struggling for a while in the GameCube to DS or Wii Nintendo era, however we want to see it, and Awakening was basically their last chance to make a game that sells well. If the Fire Emblem team was going down, they were going to go down swinging. The 3DS had a lot of active players, and a lot of the players who've never played a Fire Emblem game ended up playing their first one on that system. It does have mechanics in the game that might divide fans of the series, but is one that I've personally loved and beaten multiple times through. We'll come back to Awakening. One of the reasons I recommend this game as a starting point is because it has a setting to allow you to turn off permadeath, which has been a staple for almost every Fire Emblem game. This mechanic is also one of the reasons why it's harder for newcomers to come to the series. A couple wrong moves, and your favorite unit can be dead and gone from the game altogether. Overextend with your main tank and he or she dies? Well, better find another way to tackle the rest of the game. From New Mystery of the Emblem and on, the option to turn off permadeath has been in the game, so newcomers can learn the game without the brutal consequences the series has been known for. Permadeath has always been a double-edged sword, but in Awakening, you can learn the game without getting too frustrated. If you're more of a story-focused gamer, I would choose Fire Emblem Fates next. Hopefully some of you got that joke. But if you are more focused on the story in Fire Emblem, I would actually choose Fire Emblem Gaiden, Echoes, whichever one you want to call it, Shadows of Valentia, or Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn next. Echoes is a remake of Gaiden or Fire Emblem 2 for the 3DS, and it was done very well. I will warn you that you should probably get the 3DS remake though. Fire Emblem Gaiden for the Nintendo Famicom is hard to track down and obtain legally, and thankfully there is an option to make it easier in the remake. The story is fantastic though. If you don't go with Echoes, I would go for another game that's also known for its brutal difficulty, and that's Radiant Dawn. This game is mainly difficult for a translation error when choosing the difficulty in the beginning. The difficulties are pretty standard for Fire Emblem, are normal, hard, and lunatic. But in the English version, it was translated as easy, normal, and hard. You see how this can be an issue. This means don't be afraid of choosing the easy difficulty setting in the English version, because it's actually the normal difficulty setting in a regular Fire Emblem game. This is also very recommended if you want the story of the game, because I will say, the game gets tough. After playing these games, I would go with either Fire Emblem 7 or Awakening if you haven't started playing those games already, for reasons that we've already talked about. Now let's switch routes. If you like combat over story, there's a little bit different of a route for you to go. I still say start with Sacred Stones, but if you're a fast learner, you'll move past that one pretty quickly. As I mentioned before, there are Fire Emblem games known for being pretty damn hard, but I wouldn't jump into them just yet. I mean, if you want to get your ass kicked, just try Thracia 776 and see how far you'll get till you give up. Instead, I would choose Path of Radiance to understand the battle system more and how certain weapons are situationally very helpful. Path of Radiance isn't too bad difficulty-wise too, but you won't understand everything the games have to offer after just one of them. This game also has a bonus experience system which allows you to see which classes are extremely useful in certain maps. After Path of Radiance, I would go to Fire Emblem 6 Binding Blade, starring Roy R. Boy, from our favorite fighting game series, Soul Calibur. Man, if he was only in Smash Bros. This will be the first test of how hard the games can become. If you're having trouble finding Binding Blade, I would choose Fire Emblem Echoes to see how these combat systems can differ and see the little idiosyncrasies between the two, and figure out how to recognize the differences to be mastered. If you want the true test of Fire Emblem difficulty in combat, you can either go Conquest on Lunatic or Radiant Dawn on Hard, where one bad move will punish you worse than you would think. I didn't think the normal difficulty settings were bad on these games, but Conquest's Lunatic mode, oh my gosh, that's just insane. Now here's where I'm going to go back to Awakening. I do want to note a couple of big differences that come with the games I've talked about, because you do want to know what you're getting into. Awakening allows you to build support with your units by pairing them up on the battlefield while still taking up only one space. This means that there's a possibility of both of them attacking at once, while also having the possibility of them defending when you can actually negate the opponent's attack. This was a huge change from the Fire Emblem games before, which is why I actually ordered the games the way that I did. It is a lot different to start with Awakening, even though it is a good starting point in my mind, and then go back to the Game Boy Advance games. To me, Fates actually had the best combat in any Fire Emblem game, but one of the worst stories. If you want a better overall game experience, I would start with a simpler battle system, then work your way up to the Fates combat. If you want to make Awakening easier, just give every unit Gale Force. That skill definitely needed a fix after that game. Awakening also brought back with it the child system, where if two units are paired up long enough, or have high enough support, they can have an offspring. This was the second game in the series to have this mechanic, the first being Genealogy of the Holy War. If you're wondering why some people might refer to the newer Fire Emblem games as quote-unquote waifu wars, this is why. The people who loved the brutal tactics game that they played in the past saw this as an unnecessary addition to the series, which affected the gameplay quite a bit. Some were insulted that the series now included this, while others really liked the change of pace that Awakening delivered. If you've noticed, most of the games that I recommended were from the pre-Awakening time. That's because to get into the series, I think it's important to start with those games. While I still love Awakening and the Fates games, it would be a lot harder for players that start with those games to go back to the older ones in the series, and really appreciate those. While I can be nitpicky about certain games in the series, as a whole, they've been absolutely stunning. They challenge you and allow for a lot of customizations to all the different variety of characters that they have in the game. While I do love permadeath, I've had friends who were turned off from the series mainly because of it. I would love to hear what Fire Emblem games you have enjoyed or which ones you plan to play as well. I hope this video will help if you're interested in the style of games that Fire Emblem, XCOM, Advance Wars, Final Fantasy Tactics has. Let me know if you've played a Fire Emblem game or if you actually plan to play one in the future. Once again, thanks for watching. This is Nick, signing off.